the College Football Rewind, and this is our fourth show. We were trying to count and figure that out before we got everybody on here, but this is our fourth and final show. I can't thank this group enough for coming back on again. It's been loads of fun. And I started off with a few topics earlier in the week. I gave the coaches some ideas of what we were going to talk about, and then I looked at my agenda today. Imagine that, it's full. So I got a few surprises for the guys when they come on. So I got to bring them on one by one. I'll bring on Coach DeCola's back again. Can't wait to ask him what went wrong with his Clemson Tigers and Trevor Lawrence. We'll talk to him on that. I got Nick from C-Bus back. He's probably itching to get at Coach Medicis after Coach Medicis said Ryan Day is not an elite coach. We'll see what those two have to say. I'm going to bring Coach Kramer on again and see that if Urban Meyer goes to Jacksonville, does he take Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence as his top pick for the first pick in the NFL draft? So I'm excited to get the guys on. Let's bring them on. I'm going to keep the hoop coach in the waiting room to start. So let's see if I can get the crew on here one by one. Let me get everybody in here. Let me get them off mute. Get Coach Medicis off mute. Let's see if I can spin you guys around. There we go, guys. What's going on?
What's going on, Rock?
How's it going?
I know we were trying to figure this thing out of how many shows. So this is the fourth show that we've done, and I always say I'm going to keep it to a few things, but I think I got a little bit more than a few agenda items tonight. So let's jump right to it. I just want to get to some of the bowl matchup, guys, and get your thoughts. I said brief in the comments so we can get to the semifinal games, and obviously we'll talk about the national championship game. But let's just kind of go around horn. I'll start with Coach Kramer first. What was a bowl game that you were intrigued you the most? And there wasn't many good bowl games, but there were some.
I'll tell you what, I was all locked in like many to the semifinal games. I was disappointed in some others because of the opt-outs. I don't think the matchups were exactly what would have played out in the season. But one game I really wanted to watch was the Oregon-Iowa State game. We've talked a lot about Matt Campbell. We've talked about their reign in the Big 12 or their climb of the ladder. And I think Oregon's been, towards the top in the last couple of years. And I was pleased and happy to see him get a big victory.
Jake, what'd you think? What was your game?
Coming away from it, everyone was talking about Texas A&M and Cincinnati should have possibly been in the finals. But I think they're two bowl games that show you that the committee made the right decision with Notre Dame. With Georgia beating Cincinnati and having 10 opt-outs, and then UNC, even though the final score doesn't really have it, but they were in the fourth quarter tied, with a great game, and they had their two best running backs and receiver opt-out. So, those two games I pay attention to the most because everyone was saying those teams should have been in, but I think the committee got it right.
Nick from C-Bus, I know what game you're going with, but other than the Ohio State game, was there another one you liked?
Yeah, I had a couple too. I thought the Georgia Cincinnati game was a blast to watch. Right, I thought you had everything that you wanted in that football game. Granted, Georgia had some opt-outs, but thought you had some really good defense. You had some good offense. You had questionable coaching decisions. As some of the clock management that Fickell had as the game wore down there, I thought cost Cincinnati a chance to really lock home that game. And then I thought, the fighting Pat Fitzgeralds in Northwestern, while Auburn's not necessarily, a world beater this year by any stretch of the imagination, I thought to see Northwestern, take one on the chops against Ohio State in the second half there and really get out physical. And then they go match the physicality of an SEC team, even being Auburn, I thought was a fun bowl game to watch.
Medicis, I know you're going Liberty and Coastal, right?
Well, that was the best game. That was the best game to watch. But the game I was going to pick was Florida, Oklahoma. And I think it just shows that, there are good teams that struggle early on and figure it out. And you look at what Oklahoma did. Now, granted, you can take it with a grain of salt because Florida was missing half their team. But the way that Oklahoma really put it on Florida, you can start the debate and say, all right, you know what? Cincinnati kind of struggled. Texas A&M kind of struggled. Oklahoma was that next team. They had 2 losses. Are we putting the best 4 teams in or the best resumes in?
Yeah, I think you guys hit them all. Those were a lot of the games that I had. The Georgia-Cincinnati game, I felt bad for Fickell because I thought Cincinnati dominated the first half And then that second half, I wasn't crazy about the play calling in the fourth quarter under a minute to go in the game with Cincinnati. But listen, I'll tell you what, to me, they proved they belonged because they dominated the game. And then I think the other one, unfortunately, was the Mississippi State Tulsa game when the fight broke out. Mike Leach that was a good win for Mike Leach. That was a good win at 3-7. But his comments after the game, I think everybody knows how dumb and weird Mike Leach can be. But I think the comments and just the brawl itself really capped off college football. And that's just something that I don't think any of us really wanted to see. And Nick and Coach Medicis, I agree with you. That Oklahoma and Florida game, I mean, say what you want. I know Florida was missing a lot of guys, but give credit to Oklahoma's defense. I thought Oklahoma's defense, what they did to Kyle Trask, we haven't seen that from Trask all season. And there was probably not a hotter team in the country than Oklahoma at the end of the year. So tip your hat to Oklahoma. They're going to be pretty darn good next year. They're going to return a lot of people off that team. So really excited to see what they do come next season. They should be preseason top 5. So, guys, I want to real quick, Texas made a coaching change. Tom Herman, at one point, everybody said Tom Herman was coming back. The AD, I'm sure the boosters were in his ear. They make the change. They relieve Tom Herman, and they bring in Steve Sarkisian. So I just kind of want to get your guys' take real fast. Coach Kramer, what'd you think of the move?
Well, we've talked about this a couple different times. I think that, the blue bloods of college football, we saw them play in the national semifinals, and I think we put Texas, Michigan, USC potentially in that as well. And I think those schools all are wondering, why not us? And if there's not a hotter assistant coach right now than Sark, and he's a proven head coach as well. So I think they had an opportunity to get the guy they wanted. I think they obviously tried for Urban Meyer first. It didn't work out, but I think that fell in their lap, and a can't miss opportunity right now. So I like the move.
Jake, how about yourself?
Not really a big fan of the move. I didn't think he was that great of a head coach out in the West Coast with the Pac-12 with Washington, USC. He has 10 wins, over 500. And going to Texas, Herman was 32-18. And I think that what really hurt him was the emergence of Texas A&M. Now that's the biggest team in Texas. Everyone's talking about Texas A&M and almost getting to the playoffs and everything. And I think Texas is starting to feel it, and their boosters of being on the hot seat. Like, why not us? And so I think that's why they mostly made the change.
Coach Medicis, how about you?
Well, I think, if you're at Texas, you have to beat Oklahoma, and it's no different than any big rivalry. And I almost want to say, in a year when Oklahoma was, quote unquote, down with the early loss, that loss by Texas really hurt Herman. I mean, at that point, it was almost like it didn't matter what happened the rest of the year. He was done. It's nice to see coaches get a second chance, but I'm really interested to see how this one turns out because expectations are so high at Texas. I mean, you have to be a top 4 team or you're on the hot seat right away. Sarkisian had a great job at USC and kind of blew that. So I'm interested to see what happens. It's nice to see people, when given the second chance, Nick Saban brings him to Alabama. He took advantage of that. It looks like he cleaned his act up. I'm rooting for him. I guess I'm going to have to wait and see on the hire.
Giannis, Herman's got those Ohio ties. What's the talk in Columbus with Tom Herman now?
Not a lot of tears shed for watching Herman get the boot, but I'm going to echo what Jake said. I'm not sure that it's that big of an upgrade over Herman. To be fair, I'm all about the second chances. I'm with Medicis on that, right? I want to see how it plays out. I think it's fascinating. But I think from an alumni standpoint or from a fan standpoint, I don't know if I'm looking at Sark and saying, okay, this is the guy that's going to elevate our culture and our program back to the status that we think it belongs. I heard for a long time that they wanted a Texas guy or they needed somebody that understood, the level of expectation there. And while I think Sark is a great offensive mind, he has his demons in the past. He struggled at other programs. So I feel like it may be a little bit of a reach. I guess from my perspective, I think they felt like they had to make a change. And so they went to the hot name once they couldn't get Urban. But I think in my mind, there's a big wait and see there. did you really elevate your program by that hire? I mean, are recruits really going to run to go play for Sark over over some of the other top brands in college football? I don't think that's the case.
Guys, $15 million to buy Tom Herman out, $10 million to buy his assistant coaches out. Texas just spent $25 million to get rid of the coaches, and then obviously bringing Steve Sarkisian in. Listen, you guys said it all. When Steve Sarkisian, he was 35-29 at Washington. He was 12-6 at USC, was fired 5 games in, but he was more fired because of the alcohol problem, that he had there. I think one of the reasons they brought him in is because out goes Sam Ehlinger. It's a young quarterbacks. It's a young team. They're strictly probably going off of what he's done in Alabama, but let's be real. He's had some pretty good quarterbacks in Alabama, in that quarterback room. So I think they're going off of what he's done with Alabama. I think it's like when Tom Herman got this job in Texas. He was the hot coordinator, hot coach at that time. I don't think it's an upgrade. I think it's going to be the same thing. If the boosters lay off of Steve Sarkisian, they stay out of his ear, he's going to bring a top-notch staff in with him. I think if they let him coach and they give him 2 or 3 years, I think he'll turn Texas around. But again, I don't know who said the Texas A&M comment. Jimbo Fisher's got good recruits coming to Texas A&M, and Texas A&M's not going away anytime soon. So you still got Oklahoma, you still got A&M, and you still got Texas. But you got some other teams in the Big 12 that were at least competitive this season. So I'll be anxious to see what they do. But $25 million to part ways with Tom Herman and some of those assistant coaches. So, all right, guys, the Heisman Trophy last night, DeVonta Smith. Clear-cut winner. I think between the quarterbacks, I think Trevor Lawrence was just a little bit ahead of Mac Jones in votes. But Alabama had 3 of the top 5 with Najee Harris in the top 5. That's huge for Alabama because I think Najee Harris should at least been a finalist for the Heisman Trophy. But what were your guys' thoughts? Coach Medici, let's start with you.
Well, I think that's, again, going back to Sarkisian, that was one of the reasons why Sarkisian's such a hot name. I mean, when was the last time an offensive coordinator had 3 of his players up for a Heisman? So I think that was one of the big pushes for him.
Lane Kiffin.
Yes. But again, I think, watching the semifinal games and watching the bowl games and watching Kyle Trask struggle, mightily struggle. And then Trevor didn't have his best game. I think it was clear as day. DeVonta Smith was he earned the award. He had a great game. It was kind of the icing on the cake there to put on a performance like that on national TV. Thought he was the clear-cut best player in the country. I thought it was a pretty easy pick right there.
Jake, how about you?
Being a Clemson fan, obviously I wanted Trevor to win, but Smith was a heck of a player, and he did all those catches and touchdowns and yards in the SEC against corners that are probably going to be first round, second round picks, and he had separation 4 to 5 yards, make them look foolish. It's just amazing how he was not even in the conversation whatsoever, and how he almost came out of nowhere. Even though last year, I think he still had double-digit touchdowns, but he was with Judy and all those guys at Alabama. The only interesting thing to me is if you take him off Alabama, does he still do those somewhere else with an average quarterback? And as Alabama, they're still probably winning. Where we saw when we took Trevor off Clemson, it's a whole different team. It was a much closer game. But obviously it's not a career award, which Trevor probably would have won that. But it's who was the best season. And he did. He had a better season with it.
Jake, do you think if Trevor would have played those, he missed 2 games? If he would have played those 2 games, you think it would have been a little bit different?
If Trevor went out and threw, let's say, 8 touchdowns out of those and they blew out Notre Dame, I think it might have been a little bit closer. And what Nick said is those semifinal games, those didn't come in a factor with the Heisman. That votes were already in. It was after the championship, the conference championship games. So I think that did hurt him a little bit, and not playing Florida State and missing out on that game. So it could have been 3 games right there due to COVID. And I think it would have been much closer, but it all depends how well he played or not.
Giannis, what'd you think?
I liked it. I thought it was refreshing to see a non-quarterback win the award, especially at a receiver position. I thought that was long overdue. I think Jake has some good points, right? I think that's always the argument about the Heisman. Is it a career achievement award? Is it best player on your team? Is it the most valuable player on your team, right? I think there's a lot that goes into that, and that's debatable, I think, across all those Heisman voters. But I know from a receiver from that position, he's the best I've seen probably in the last 7 or 8 years in college football. When you look at his route running, being polished at the level that it is, and then you add in the athleticism with some of the catches that he makes. I think the other interesting thing, Jake, I think you said came out of nowhere. He wasn't even the number 1 receiver on Alabama going into the year. Waddle got hurt, I don't know, week 2 or week 3. And he really kind of burst onto the scene. So to me, that's an amazing story that you go from the number 2 wide receiver on a dominant national championship contending team to all of a sudden you're hosting the Heisman Trophy at the end of the season. So great story, and that's really what I look for in the Heisman. I like to grab the story there.
Jim, if you take Devontae Smith off there and you have Mac Jones, Trevor Lawrence, and Kyle Trask, I don't want to say who would you pick as the better quarterback, but which one of the 3 you think had the better season?
Well, I compare the Trevor Lawrence situation a lot to Peyton Manning's situation. I think that he was held to such a high standard. I mean, everyone thought that if he didn't dominate, that he played a poor game. And you saw the same thing with Peyton when Charles Woodson came out and ended up winning that Heisman. He's a can't-miss prospect. I'll agree with Jake. I'll take Trevor Lawrence every time. I think he's a phenomenal football player. And I think Nick makes a great point, too. I mean, Smith is a tremendous receiver. But how many of those targets go away if Waddle is healthy throughout the year? And those numbers aren't even close. So I think a lot of things fell in line to have that happen. I'm not going to take anything away. I think he's a tremendous football player. He's an elite wide receiver, and he made big plays in big games, and I'm sure he's looking to do the same in the title game.
I think if you take that, throw the cleat game away for Kyle Trask when LSU beat Florida in that game. I'm trying to go back to think if Florida would have beat LSU, they still would have only had – they would have had what, the 1 loss still going into the SEC game? And, after that, I just think things went downhill for Trask. I mean, I don't know if you lose the team once you have 2 losses, you're out of the national title hope. Because I thought that with 1 loss, they still had a shot. I thought they were the best 1-loss team, that was still alive. Mac Jones, the thing I just want to add with him, and Jake, you said it, if you take, him off of Alabama is, with all the talent around him, it's almost like Alabama puts in a quarterback. And again, I'm not taking anything away from him, but it's nice to have the weapons that he has around him. Really, he's got to manage the game. He can make some bad throws where the receivers will make you look good. So I'm not sure if you take him off like you did Trevor Lawrence. I think it would have been the other way around. I would still take Trevor Lawrence over the 3 quarterbacks that were there. And there were a lot of good quarterbacks too in college football. So, all right, guys, I want to spend a few minutes here. I want to talk about the 2 semifinal games, and I don't want to spend too much time because I really spent most of the time on Alabama and Ohio State and talking through some of that for a little bit, and then we'll get into our Coach of the Year. I got Story of the Year, and then we'll do our pardon shots and predictions. But let's start with the Alabama-Notre Dame game first. To me, when I watched the game, it really felt like to me that Alabama kind of sleepwalked through this thing. I felt like the game was worse than it really was. I mean, 31-14, Notre Dame scored late, which I'm glad because they covered the spread, and I was actually able to win because I bet the game. But I feel like Alabama could have scored when they wanted to score. Mac Jones did his thing. Najee Harris did his thing. Devontae Smith, did his thing. Did we learn anything different about Notre Dame in this game? I mean, they haven't had any key wins in these big playoff games in the last, 8 games, I think, was the stats. They were 0-8. Did we learn anything different, Jake, with Notre Dame from this game?
I would say not really. It's they're on the step, knocking towards that. Like Brian Kelly says, I think that's another good stepping stone for him. And he's been there before in the national championship, so he shows that he can get back there. But unfortunately, this year Alabama is just loaded, and it looked like at times Alabama was just toying with them in the second half, almost like, all right, we're just gonna come out and run our base stuff. We don't want to show anything for the next 2, or the Clemson or Ohio State. that they were going to play the following week. So they were just vanilla during the second half, because I really think they could have put up a lot of points on them in the second half, but I think they were just holding back and trying to hide some stuff for it, the national championship game.
Nick, how about Brian Kelly? What do we think of him?
Yeah, I thought it told me a lot about Brian Kelly in his post-game comments, maybe more than the actual game. I think at some point as the coach, you have to own the fact that every time you get to the show or you get to a relevant game, you get your doors blown off. Whether he wants to, you can congratulate his team on having a great year. I'm not going to knock them. They had a fantastic season, but they're the reason we don't take them seriously in the regular season when they go 6-0 or 7-0 to start the year. It's because every time we see them play outside of this Clemson game in the regular season, minus Lawrence, they fall short. They are a fundamental football team. Their offense is very vanilla. They don't strike me as very creative whatsoever when it comes to the offensive side of the football. I think defensively they've been solid for the last 5 or 6 years. I like watching them play defense. But I think if Brian Kelly is not willing to adapt a little bit to this modern age of college football with a little bit more spread offense and really start to utilize those weapons, I think they're going to continue to be there. And if I'm a Notre Dame fan, I'm looking at Brian Kelly and saying, are you my guy to restore us back to national championship, prowess? I mean, and let's not kid ourselves. Chase Claypool was at Notre Dame last year. They've had talent. Michael Floyd was at Notre Dame. They get big-time offensive talent, especially on the outside, and they still can't get it done. And that still points back to me to Kelly.
Medicis, you're always on me about Michigan's damn expectations of that program. So I'm going to ask you, the expectations of Notre Dame, Brian Kelly can get there, but he can't win, the big game in a national championship. You think it's any different from Notre Dame with the expectations?
There's 122 teams that would love to be in the situation that Notre Dame's in. They're a game away from playing for a national title. They just have to get over that hump. And if I'll ask you, Rock, you're a Michigan fan. Would you take what Notre Dame's program is right now over where you're at as a Michigan fan? Because they're right there. They just have to figure out how to get more talent, how to get more speed on the outside, how to whatever needs to get done. The reality is I'm against. I don't think the committee got it right. I thought Oklahoma was a better team than them. I think Texas A&M should have got in. I'll say it again. And I think, when you're the fourth or fifth best team and you don't get in, there's a huge letdown that goes into a meaningless bowl game, especially one that happens after the 2 semifinal games. So you sit there and you watch Alabama roll over Notre Dame, and then you're supposed to come out and be motivated the next day to play a game that means nothing. I think that had a lot to do with that Texas A&M game. And that, yes, they still won the game. They pulled away late. It was a lot closer. North Carolina had opt-outs, but at some point they start thinking, all right, this season's over. This game doesn't really mean much. I just need to stay healthy and either return for my next year or get ready for the NFL draft.
Jim, I know I always bring up the Michigan piece, and Cianis always gives me grief on Saturdays, and so's Medicis. But the thing I want to ask is this: when you look at Notre Dame, 7-8 games that they haven't won, they've been in the big game. They've lost to the Clemsons, they've lost to the Alabamas, they've lost to the Ohio States, they've lost to the teams that perennial the last 10 years. Nobody's really beaten those teams. So if you're Notre Dame and you do look at the expectations, and you go back and you look at the recruiting, I feel like all we've heard over the last 10 years is Notre Dame doesn't get speed, but yet they're in the game. So is Brian Kelly the answer at Notre Dame, or is it recruiting? What's got to give at Notre Dame?
I agree with Nick here. I think at Notre Dame's closer than we think. I think that I give Brian Kelly credit from the sense that he's recruiting to an identity. He wants big linemen. He wants tight ends. He's going to play a more NFL style of offense rather than the spread that you see in college. One thing I'll say about Kelly, though, in this game, and I really thought Notre Dame would play them closer. I thought they had better team speed than what they showed. Mm-hmm. I thought Brian Kelly coached scared and timid in the first half. I thought there was a 3rd and 6 early in the game, and he took the ball out of Book's hands and ran a quarterback keeper. I thought the game needed to develop quicker to allow Book. He didn't allow Book to use his arm at all. He was trying to run the ball. He had an early 4th and 2 around midfield. He wasn't going to play aggressive in that moment. And I think we all said the way that Notre Dame was going to win that game is he was going to have to take a couple chances. There is no doubt Alabama is the best team in the country right now until someone proves different. I don't care if that's Clemson, Ohio State, or any of the other teams playing them right now. Alabama is an elite team. I just wish he took the handcuffs off and just let it rip. You watch who played Alabama the toughest this year. Ole Miss, because Lane Kiffin said, "All right, you're going to score 50. I'm going to try to score 51." And he just played ball. And maybe Ohio State's got to look to get this thing in a shootout and not try to control the ball and just see if he can get in a foot race with them.
Well, speaking of Ohio State, I want to jump to that Ohio State-Clemson game fast, and then we'll get into the Alabama-Ohio State game. And obviously, Fields was fantastic. I was going to say Trevor Lawrence there because I was looking at my sheet, but Fields was fantastic. I mean, there's no getting around it. 6 touchdowns. I mean, that's the game that I think we all thought. And I think, Medicis, you've been saying that Ohio State was due for a game like that, and they put it all together. But what I was really impressed at the most, again, and we've talked about it on this show, and I've talked about it, Nick, on Saturday, is Ohio State ran the football. They ran the football with success. It opened up some deep throws, and Fields made some really, really nice deep throws. But that front four for Ohio State got to Trevor Lawrence. Lawrence had some pressure, as times when he was throwing, making some throws. So I really was happy to see Ohio State finally said, we're going to run the football. We're not going to sit back there and throw it 30, 40 times a game. Jim, do you like Ryan Day's game plan?
How do you argue with the outcome of it? I think we talked about, Smith winning the Heisman when Waddle getting hurt, helping that. I think Master Teague getting hurt actually helped Ohio State. I think that Trey Sermon is without question the feature back there. He's shouldn't be splitting carries in this national championship game. And I agree with you, Rock. I was thoroughly impressed with the line play on both sides of the ball by Ohio State. They dominated the line of scrimmage. And Larry Johnson Sr. is a very well-known coach, and he's put some great players in the pros. We haven't seen someone get Mac Jones off his spot yet at Alabama. And if he can get that pressure and get him off his spot, I'm very interested to see how that affects the Alabama offense.
Jake, I want to ask you the Clemson question here. Etienne only had 10 carries for 32 yards, and as Coach Kramer's talking about, Ohio State up front did a really good job controlling the line of scrimmage. They were playing in the Ohio State or the Clemson backfield. Lawrence threw the ball 48 times. And I think if you go back to the game plan, if you asked Dabo Swinney if he had to throw it 48 times, where would they be? No run game.
Yeah, I mean, I think Clemson never got into a rhythm, and I think it got kind of out of hand early, so they felt like they had to throw the ball and put it in Trevor's hand. That was their best option. And also not having their OC, and having another coach. Yeah, they're there, but it's not the same person calling the plays all year. And I would thought Dabo should have stepped up and possibly even called some himself instead of putting everything on really a first-time guy calling plays other than I think he was at Richmond or something like a lower level as an offensive coordinator. So that's a lot of pressure on someone new. And you can see at some things that they were trying to, do that they normally don't do. And then when the score kind of got at hand, it was like, all right, Trevor, get us back in, and we're going to try to throw some deep shots downfield, which, we heard all along Ohio State's weak in the secondary. You can throw over the top. And I think that helped, Ohio State's D-line to pin their ears back. All right, they're not running the ball, they're throwing it. Now, Justin Fields, he made some great throws, and it's a game of inches. Some of those touchdowns, the defender's right there, perfect position, but that ball is 2 inches higher, and the guy's making the catch. The thing I was really disappointed with the defense. With that big hit on Fields and him being hurt, I thought, and like any of us coaches, you see someone kind of hurt, you're going to attack that player. I thought they should send possibly more blitzes at Fields and kind of rough them up and see how well. I'm not saying take cheap shots to take him out, but hit him, make him feel it more than kind of stay back and see, okay, he's grimacing when he throws the ball. We can play more zone behind it instead of hey, let's go after him and make him get off his spot and throw from different angles. And that's what I was disappointed with. But, Ohio State had a great game plan. They came out, they used the tight ends, which they haven't done all season. And those tight ends had a big game. And I think, as coaches, you come out and show the team something like that they haven't practiced for. It's hard to do in-game adjustments a lot of times.
Giannis Fields was great. We know that. Trey Sermon was great too. But let's not forget Chris Olave had 6 catches, 2 for 132 yards and 2 touchdowns. What were your thoughts on Ohio State?
I mean, obviously the most complete game they played all year, hands down, right? I think the one thing that we all underestimated, and maybe even fans of Ohio State, is Ohio State has been waiting to play that game for 365 days after they lost to Clemson in the playoffs last year. So there was a lot. I have not seen Ohio State play that aggressive and that angry, a controlled aggression, but I have not seen them play that way really since Bama in 2014. You could tell the way they played defense, they tackled extremely well. I thought obviously I would echo what Jake said in relationship to the tight ends. I've been screaming for them to utilize the tight ends all year. And similar to the wrinkle they threw at Clemson last year, they threw to the back out of the backfield last year. They used Dobbins a lot out of the backfield, which they had not done a ton during the regular season. And I think the tight end was the wrinkle this year. I think the interesting thing with Ohio State's defensive line, this year has been, they don't have the name, right? They don't have the Chase Young or the Bosa brothers that we've had for the last 9 years, but by no means does that mean that they were void of talent there? And so I think that the nation probably got to see that Clemson maybe isn't as stout up front, especially on the offensive line that maybe people thought that they were. I think Ohio State exposed that to a degree. I think the other thing that we saw is, with any team, Clemson is no different than, we'll talk about Bama, Ohio State. When you make them uncomfortable, when you get that early lead, Ohio State went on that big blitz in the second quarter there. As soon as that happened, all the pressure then is on Clemson now, right? They have to make the adjustment. Ohio State really got to play their game from midway through the first quarter to the end of the game, and Clemson really did not have an answer. Medicis, I'm going to give a shout out to you, right? You made the comment about Day and what has he done? What has he won a game? I thought the other thing that Day did that was phenomenal was the knock or the talk is Venables has a way to steal signs, right? All probably legal. I'm not insinuating anything wrong. If he can steal them, that's good for him. But I thought you saw Day counter that very, very early in the game by running huddles staying in the huddle with 27 seconds, and then about 6 seconds to go on the play clock. They're racing up and snapping the ball. And what you noticed was Clemson's defense could not get lined up. They were all discombobulated from the defensive line to the linebacking core to the back end. So I thought Day really showed his coaching chops again of really kind of elevating and trying to counter what he felt like was a disadvantage last year, where he felt like Clemson always knew what Ohio State was going to run. So tip of the cap to Day for that as well.
Medicis, you going back on your Ryan Day statement from 2 weeks ago?
I'm not putting him as an elite coach, but I will say I was impressed with some of the things he did. I also want to know how Nick is stealing my notes, because I have starred here Ohio State huddled, which is very uncommon. They varied their tempo. They controlled the line of scrimmage because of it. So I think that was one of the key points that I saw is Ohio State, they used some huddle. They came out late, and Clemson looked to be scrambling all over the place. I'm also not going to discount Skalski getting hurt or the targeting and getting ejected from the game and how that kind of changed the defense. Clemson all of a sudden starts slanting their line, and all of a sudden you look at Trey Sermon, he starts cutting back, and now it's one-on-one, him against the safety, and Sermon was winning that every time. So I think it goes back to what, Rock, we were talking about last Saturday, how Ohio State kind of stumbled upon this ground game where they wanted to spread it out. They wanted to get Fields, the Heisman. They wanted to get numbers. They couldn't do it. And they started to run the ball against Northwestern like, man, we can run all game. Why would we do anything else? And I think from that point on, they've been pounding the ball, and it's been working.
Did the basketball coach say
any quarterback makes a quarterback look so much better. Brock playing that. You have that run game that gets you 8 yards and that play action. Now you got that 2 extra seconds back there, the deep shots. That makes any quarterback look good.
The one thing I would say about the run game, and I get it, Sermon's had a 2-game run here that's been incredible, but Ohio State was averaging over 200 yards rushing leading up to the Northwestern game. I think it's a misconception that Ohio State wasn't running the football consistently going into Clem's game. Maybe not at the level that Sermon was, and don't get me wrong, there's an explosiveness that Sermon brings to the backfield that Teague does not. So from that perspective, but I think it's a little bit of a misnomer to think that Ohio State wasn't running the ball effectively going into the Big Ten championship game. If you look at their numbers going into the game, I believe they were in the top 11 or 12 in that range in a rushing attack going into the Big Ten championship game. So by no means were they got away from the run, but they found the home run hitter that Dobbins was last year.
Fields had more rushing yards then too, and
for sure. Yeah, they were finding a way to piece together their rush yards from that as well. Good call out, Jake. But by no means were they throwing it 50 times a game and just abandoning the run.
I'm still laughing because I think the basketball coach said, I heard him say the defensive line slanted.
It was all over.
I didn't think I'd ever hear a basketball coach say they slanted. So I got to give him a check for that. If we were doing the old around the horn, I'd give him a couple points for that. So, Coach, I'll bring it back on. Don't worry. All right, the Alabama-Ohio State national championship game. Many people right now, the line's 8. Alabama's an 8-point favorite. Many are saying that it depends on Justin Fields if he's healthy, and Ohio State can show up and play like they did against Clemson. They think they can compete with the Alabama. Jake, what's the key for Ohio State to have a shot to win?
I think they just got to be balanced. Having that 12 personnel, is a hard type of personnel, especially if you can run it and you got tight ends that can get open and make moves. That's definitely, you're creating surfaces for a defense to cover. So they could put both tight ends on the side, and that creates 2 more gaps that controls, all right, what's the defense got to do to that? And then off of that, if they're getting chunks of yards, of even 5 yards, the play action is going to open. Now, the hard part's going to be is Alabama's got one of the best corners in America. I forget his name, is number 2. So they're going to put him on Ohio State's best receiver. So the other guys are going to have to step up. I think they're going to take that part away. So they're going to have to show something different, just like they did with Clemson. Come out with a different wrinkle that Alabama's not expecting. And I think Kramer was it you or Coach Kramer saying that they're going to have to do a shootout. I don't think they could hold the ball and say, okay, we're going to try to play ball control. They're going to say, all right, let's let it fly and let's high scoring game.
Jim, if you're Ohio State with Alabama's studs on offense, you could put 8 in a box to try to stop Najee Harris. They can beat you over the top with Devontae Smith. Waddle might be back playing this week. We'll see. He's practicing. Mac Jones, of course. What do you do if you're Ohio State? How do you slow down? You might not keep them from scoring. Maybe they don't score 40, they score 30. But how do you slow down Alabama?
You got to hit the quarterback, and that's something we haven't seen anyone do this year, and that's the unknown. If he gets rattled and gets off his spot, will he stay as confident as he's been all season long? And the other thing I think is Ohio State offensively is going to help, because if they can get that lead again, I think that allows Ryan Day to stay balanced in his attack. Will Ryan Day stay balanced if all of a sudden Alabama's up 10 or 2 scores? So, defensively, I think Nick said all along that defensive front might not have the names, but they get after it. I'm very interested to see, as dominant as they were against Clemson, I'm interested to see if Ohio State, what they do at the line of scrimmage in this game, because I do think that they can cause some havoc in the backfield.
Giannis, it's Ohio State against the world, because, again, Ohio State, nobody thought they'd beat Clemson. Nobody, I don't think, has given them any chance. Even if Ohio State plays like they did against Clemson, I still don't know if it's enough to beat Bama. But Ohio State against the world, what's your Buckeyes got to do?
I hate to say this, but it's par for the course for where we've been in college football. COVID's another concern. The talk down here is there is potential that maybe half or 3/4 of a position group might be out going into Monday's game. And the rumor is it's a defensive line, which would be just absolutely disastrous for Ohio State. I think that Alabama replacing their center, I feel like up the middle is where Ohio State's defensive line really excelled. You look at them against Clemson. Togiai and Haskell Garrett up the middle were just have been a wrecking crew really all year for Ohio State. So I think similar to what Coach DeCola said, I think you have to find a way to get pressure with 4 or 5 and try to knock Mac Jones off his spot. It will be key for Ohio State to tackle well. The other great thing they did against Clemson was they did not give up the big play. They gave up one big play on the first drive where you could argue was maybe a little bit of a push off by the Clemson receiver. I thought it was a great play, but regardless, they really tackled well, limited the big play. I think that will be imperative for them on defense to try to make Alabama, when they score, make it a 7 or 8 play drive as opposed to a 3 or 4 play drive. And then I think for Ohio State on offense, you need the Fields that you saw against Clemson. You need the point guard that's willing to distribute the ball to the open receiver who's going to go through his progressions. It will be key for Ohio State's offensive line to keep Fields comfortable in the pocket to really allow him to scan the field. And then I'm still waiting for the Justin Fields rushing game where, and his ribs are going to be a question mark, of course, going in. But I think if he's healthy enough to take some shots, I think traditionally Alabama has struggled against running quarterbacks. And if Fields is able to have that 75 to 80-yard game on the ground and make a couple big electric plays with his feet, I think Ohio State can get there in a shootout. By no means are they going to play ball control. I'll have to go over that with everybody and grind that game out. But I think they can get into a track meet. I think what everybody realized with Ohio State versus Clemson, that offense and Ohio State's wide receiving core, it is that good. They maybe got talked a little less about this year with the COVID and the 6 games, but they got weapons on the outside. There'll be a problem. I look for Ohio State to try to follow Florida's game plan offensively against them.
I brought Coach Medicis on for this because a little birdie told me not long ago that the Big Ten waived the 6-game rule so Ohio State can get into the Big Ten championship game, and then the Big Ten waived the COVID rule from, I think, 21 to 14 to 17. And now some people are saying if there's too many injuries or too many COVID cases out there, maybe this game gets pushed back. Maybe it's to get Justin Fields healthy. I won't tell you who that little birdie was that said that, but I'll bring in Coach Medicis here to see if he wants to. I told him we'd have to bring that up tonight. Was it you that said that?
Yeah, I sent it to you guys. I just unbelievable. It's like teams don't learn their lesson. Like last week, you have Dabo Swinney ranking Ohio State 11th. Ohio State, like Nick said, thinking about this for an entire year, and you give them that extra motivation. Now Nick Saban's daughter is going to tweet out that Ohio State is scared and they're coming up, the COVID is not true and all this other nonsense. It's like, can we put more stuff on the bulletin board for this team? I mean, everybody's written them off all year. They've heard about how they're getting special exceptions. They're getting this, they're getting that. I mean, Ohio State does not need another chip on their shoulder.
But you're giving it to them with Ryan Day as an elite coach, so they probably got that on the bulletin board.
Well, listen, knowing that Nick's on the show, they are probably all listening because they want to know what they should be doing. So if I spark a little bit and I give a little pep talk to fire up Ohio State, just let me know and send me a T-shirt if you do win, and I'll take credit for it. But I mean, listen, when it comes down to a national championship, do we really need to be fired up? Do we really need that extra? When you're playing for a national title, this is what you do, all the extra stuff when you're growing up. This is what the extra hours, the extra laps, the extra reps, this is what it's about. It shouldn't take bulletin board material to fire either team up.
So I went with 3 keys, guys. You guys talked about a lot of them, but I think Jake, you were talking about the cornerback. I want to see Chris Olave against Surtain. Surtain's going to be an easy first-round pick, probably a top 10 pick. I think that's an interesting matchup. And then I think Shaun Wade, the corner for Ohio State, and Devontae Smith. Shaun Wade should be a top, they're saying, first, second-round pick. So we'll see what that is. But the offensive line for Alabama just won the Joe Moore Award for the top offensive line in college football. So that offensive line, and if it's the defensive line group for Ohio State that's got that has the COVID issues. I think it'd be a dirty shame because I would love to see that defensive line against Alabama's offensive line. And here's another number. Alabama has scored 95% in the red zone. That's a huge number inside the 20-yard line, 95%. And most of those guys are touchdowns. So we'll see how Ohio State's red zone defense is as well. All right, guys, I want to get to let me switch this up because I want to give let me just see if I want to do it this way. No, I'll keep it this way. I want to see a lot of coaches out there, guys, that are eligible and very well deserving for Coach of the Year. And I want to see who you guys think, who you have. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but Jim, let's start with you. Who'd you think was your Coach of the Year?
I went outside the box with this one. I'm going to go with Nick Saban. And the reason I'm going to say that is college coaching is all about recruiting. He continues to bring in 5 stars. For some reason, he brings in a list of 5 stars, but he continues to have a we over me attitude. You never hear them complaining in that place. He battled COVID twice. He's got three Heisman guys in the top 5. He's got the offensive line of the year. And how about the credit? How about where coaches go to reboot their coaching careers, right? Like, he's taken on Lane Kiffin, Kyle Flood, Butch Jones, Steve Sarkisian. Just keep coming in, and then we'll keep pumping you out to be head coaches throughout the country. So I went to the top man, and that's my pick of the year.
Medicis, who you got?
I think it's a no-brainer for me. It's Jamie Chadwell at Coastal Carolina.
Figure.
You're talking about a program that 4 years ago was playing in the FCS. They come in, and within 3 years, they're 11-1, a top 15 program. Or debating. Oh man.
Can I do the Tony Reale here? Can I mute you? I can. You're off mute.
I just don't understand how you can't give the guy the award. I mean, name me another program that was playing in the FCS, another division, and is now, ends the year 11-1. They were a top 10 team at the end of the year. There were even people that were talking about somehow them sneaking into the semifinal. We all know that never was going to happen, but the fact that people were even talking about Coastal Carolina before the year, how many people knew Coastal Carolina played Division I football or even had a football team to begin with? And the fact that he got them relevant, he had game day at Coastal Carolina and had them talking about potentially sneaking in, that in itself, in my eyes, earns Coach of the Year.
I wouldn't have guessed anything different, Nick.
I've been on the train all year. I'm not going anywhere.
Jake, how about you?
I'm going to go outside of people I probably don't think a lot of is Mack Brown. How he brought North Carolina, who's known as a basketball school, finishing 13th in the country, playing Texas A&M without key starters and everything, and having, recruiting classes with 2 running backs and everything, and doing a great job of playing some good teams. Yeah, they've lost to the Notre Dames, and last year they were a point away from Clemson, but I think last year they were below 500, and this year just turning that program around. That's almost North Carolina is not known for football, so I would have to go with him.
Sam Howell's back next year too, quarterback. So look out. But I like that one. Hats off to Mack Brown. He's done a fantastic job. Hey, and Texas hasn't won since he's been there. Mm-hmm. So, Cianis, who you got?
I'm going to go in the Big Ten. No, I'm not going to go Ryan Day with these. I'm actually going to go Tom Allen at Indiana. I thought what a heck of a year for him, and what a way to turn that program around. 3 top 25 wins this year. I believe they were in the top 10 for the first time since like 1945. Has been recruiting his butt off for the last couple years. He looks like a heck of a coach to play for. They got a quarterback in Michael Penix Jr., who before he got hurt looked like potentially the runner-up to the Big Ten Player of the Year or Quarterback of the Year behind Justin Fields. I don't think Indiana's going anywhere. To take a team that's been the doormat of the conference for the last 20 to 25 years and to really instill life in that program and energy in that program, they are no longer a layup. In the conference. If you say you got Indiana on the schedule, you better bring it. I think I told you guys before, he has more kids from Florida on his team in Indiana than anybody else in the Big Ten, and that's including Ohio State. that is a heck of a feat for another basketball school. That's able to recruit. So I'm going to give my vote to Tom Allen.
You know what's weird, guys? I have a list of like 6 coaches I put on my cheat sheet I have on my screen because I thought we probably all would have picked a lot of the same ones. You guys all picked different coaches. So mine, I think that Tom Allen's is a great one. I think Nick, Jamie Chad, I think he's a great one. I know you guys mentioned Pat Fitzgerald. Nobody mentioned Luke Fickell. I'm not going to take anything away from him. I went with Matt Campbell. I know Coach Kramer had mentioned Coach Campbell a little earlier in the show. I think what he's been able to do, not even just this year, but one of those 2 losses just this year first is against he beat Oklahoma. But I just think since he's been at Iowa State, just what he's turned that program into now. When you think Iowa State, they're 8-9 win, 10-team win now every year since he's been there. And a win in the Fiesta Bowl. I love the style that he plays. They're physical on the line of scrimmage. They're hard-nosed kids. And, I think, Sianis, you said Tom Allen. I mean, I'm going to jump to the stories of the year and just give you mine. For me, when I think of college football this year, there's so many good stories. But for me, when you see the locker room speeches that Tom Allen gave and, having his players sit there say, love you, coach, and just see the pure emotions on that coach's face. And some of those speeches when his son got hurt, when he went out on the field, I mean, Nick, we all got dads that were coaches, right? And sometimes it's tough because you call your dad coach or you call your dad. And when he went on that field, it hit home for me because I've had the injuries as well. And it was him being a dad. And so for me, the story of the year is just Tom Allen, and what a great story the program has been this year. Medicis, how you got?
Story of the year? Do I really need to go forward with my story of the year? It's
Carolina, right?
Mute him again.
Yeah, you can mute me again. My story of the year is the small guys getting into the top 25. You look at programs like Louisiana snuck in. Tulsa at the end of the year somehow was ranked. Coastal Carolina was ranked. Cincinnati was a top 10 team. It was like the year of the little guys, the guys that get no respect before the Big Ten was playing, before the Pac-10 was playing. Some of these guys got featured and they kind of caught the country by storm. You look at, Iowa State with Matt Campbell. Well, they started the year with a loss to Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns, by 3 touchdowns. So I think it was the year of the little guy. Unfortunately, the little guy had no shot to play the big guys at the end of the year. But the fact that they got some recognition was nice to see.
Jake, how about you?
I'm going a different route. I think one of the stories of the year shows you with scheduling, and hopefully they go forward with it, is how much, they schedule so far in advance with teams and they can't do anything, where now when COVID hit, they had to change up all their schedules. They had to get teams. They played their conference teams more, which is a better type of football, watching that than them playing, teams playing the Citadel, Wofford, and blowing out teams like that. And also seeing like a team like BYU get the call Wednesday that, hey, Liberty has this, and all right, we're going to Coastal Carolina and getting it done, and seeing, I think the Pac-12, like one of them played on a Sunday, and how teams could, all right, we can't play Saturday, but we'll play Monday, we'll play Tuesday, and just play all around, and that they got it done. And hopefully going forward that we don't need to plan out so far in advance that, you think you have a shot like a Cincinnati, hey, let's go out and try to schedule one of the big boys and get our non-conference up there and whatnot.
Sianis, how about you?
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna take the easy one, but I'm gonna maybe expound on it a little bit differently. I'm gonna go to story of the year's COVID, right? And what I mean by that is I thought what we found out, what this virus taught us about with college football was the love of the game at college football is still there, and it's so prevalent. These kids played, with insane protocols, insane testing. They couldn't go see their families on Thanksgiving. They couldn't go see their families on Christmas. They were sheltered, as Jake said, bouncing around, schedule over here, play this game, no, don't play this game. All for entertainment for us. All for us to sit here and spend an hour during the weekday talking about what we're watching on TV. So to me, the story is the resilience of those players and of those coaches throughout this unprecedented time that we went through this to entire 2020. We watched everything get dumped on its head, sports included. And so to me, the story was just really watching these programs and these kids laying it all out there when they could have easily all said, the heck with it, we'll come back in 21 and attack it. So that's my story.
Jim, how about you?
I would agree with that. And I'm going to expand on that a little bit more. I give so much credit to the players and the coaches for their discipline throughout this and their commitment and their love for the game of football. I mean, us being in New York State, we've seen a lot of things. We have Buffalo Bills with no fans. We have Syracuse University with no fans. We have no high school athletics at this point. We have not had a football season yet to this point. The story for me is how much I enjoy coming on here and talking football and how much we all just love the game, how it brings people together. And I think going through this entire process, it allowed me to reflect on how much the game really means to me as an individual. And I'll forever take that moving forward.
Yeah, well said. Well said, Coach. All right, guys, I want to get to the predictions, and I want to get who you guys think is going to win, and then I want to add the gambling line here. I got it across the ticker. Alabama right now, it's -8. So give me who you think wins, and let me know if you think they cover or they don't cover. So, Jake, who wins?
I believe Alabama will come out on top. I think they're going to win by 2 touchdowns. And just because of the firepower on offense, so if you pack the box to stop the run, they're going to throw over you. If you worry about the one receiver and the passing game of Matt Jones, Harris is going to come out and run all over you. And I just think they have such a great attack that they can attack you from multiple different ways. And I think it's going to be somewhat of a shootout. I think it's going to be in the high scores, but I think Alabama will probably be 49, 35, 32 or something like that.
So you got Alabama winning. You got Alabama covering. Cianis, what do you got?
I'm going to take Ohio State, shocker of the year. I'm going to take them 42-38. So I'll give you my score right out of the gate. I think Ohio State's only chance is to win in a shootout. I think Fields has to play at the level in which he played against Clemson. I think Ohio State has to have some explosive plays down the field. I think they got to get Alabama a little bit on tilt and make them play a little bit of a game of catch-up. They really try to take them off of their game. I think the one thing we saw with Bama is their defense can be scored upon. Whether that's Lane Kiffin showing us that in the regular season or even Florida showing us that in the conference championship game. I think if you present a good offense to Alabama, you can score on them. And I will take Ohio State's offense. Really, outside of only other offense I would probably take over is Bama. So it's going to be a heck of a dogfight. If Ohio State's healthy enough from a COVID perspective, I think you'll see a late game interception for Ohio State to seal the victory, and then they'll walk out of there 42-38. And we'll put a ring on Ohio State's finger, and maybe Medicis will be ready to give Ryan Day a little bit of love next year.
You know what? I think we do this. If Ohio State wins, I think I get Medicis the shirt, and he's got to wear it in on Saturday. I think he's got to put an Ohio State shirt on.
I will gladly send him a national championship T-shirt to wear into the studio.
All right, so you got Ohio State winning. You got them covering the 8. So that's interesting. Coach Kramer, what do you got?
Well, obviously, COVID's going to play a role in this. We got to see what roster is going to show up. I mean, could we see, if healthy, could we see a Vince Young, Mac Brown, Texas over USC type shocker, right? I think we all said Ohio State, we didn't know if they were going to get in, but we all knew they were good enough once they got in to make some things happen. So I think this game is going to be very close. I do think it's going to be high scoring. And I'm going to go Roll Tide, but I'm looking 45-41-ish. I do not think Alabama covers.
All right, 8. I haven't bet the game yet. That's why I'm asking you guys. That's why I see the points in.
Yell at all of us later if we blow the pick.
Medicis, who you got?
Wouldn't it be such a curveball if I picked Ohio State after everything I've said all year?
You don't want it.
The one thing I will say, and I don't know that anyone talked about it yet, is I haven't seen Alabama down. I want to see what happens when Mac Jones is trailing. I want to see how Steve Sarkisian calls the game, knowing he's got one foot out the door to Texas and they're down. I think that's something that if you're Ohio State, you have to start early. If you can jump on them and see if they get one-dimensional, see if they go away from Najee Harris, see what happens. So I am picking Alabama. I think Alabama wins by 10. I think it's a lot closer than people think. I think Alabama scores really late to cover. I will say Ohio State has a chance where I thought 2 weeks ago it was Alabama and no one else had a chance. I think Ohio State does have a chance, but I'm picking Bama.
I think I'm gonna go with Bama, and the only reason why I'm gonna go with Bama is two things. Coach Kramer hit on it with the COVID impact. If Ohio State's down some defensive linemen, we don't know how healthy Justin Fields is going to be. And listen, he got those shots at halftime that he was numb. He didn't feel anything. You know, if you're playing with broken ribs, I mean, guys, we were quarterbacks, right? You're playing with broken ribs and you're getting hit after hit. You don't want to take those hits. So I think a lot of depend on the health. But I'll say this, Medicis, you're saying about the coaching piece. I don't disagree with you. Nick Saban's too good of a coach. Nick Saban's been there before with a lot of these coaches that have left for different jobs. I think they find a way. I think they get it done. I think it'll be high scoring, but I think Bama covers. I just think Alabama's got too much. I just don't know who you stop. Ohio State, you know, did they come out and play the best game of the year and they left all their points on the board? I don't know, but I'm going to go with Alabama. I think it'll be a lot closer. I'm going to probably say Alabama maybe like 42-32, you know, maybe a 10-point game around there, but I do think Alabama covers the 8 points. All right, guys, I want to get to my favorite segment, but before I pull you guys off, I don't know how I kept this thing to an hour with all the topics we had. But I know I thank you guys on every show, and I can't thank you guys enough. This has been a complete blast. And Coach Kramer, I agree with you. There hasn't been a football season yet, you know, for you guys out there. But you guys have given me an awesome way to stay involved with the game here and talk football. And I think you hit it right on the head. It shows us how much we love the game to come on here and talk about it. I think we can probably talk about this thing for 2 hours if we wanted to. But you know, Coach Kramer and Coach DeCola, good luck. I know I'll talk to you guys before, but I hope you guys have a football season, and both you guys are welcome on Saturday mornings to call, and we'll talk New Hartford football, we'll talk RFA football, but I hope to see you guys on the field this football season. So thank you guys too. And Nick from C-Bus, man, we started this thing a long time ago at Fats Billiards, so you're always welcome on. I love you. I appreciate you coming on Saturday mornings too. And Medicis, for a basketball guy, man, I give you credit. You can talk some football, but you've been awesome to have on both shows, man. So I appreciate you as well.
Thanks, Rock.
Oh, thanks, Rock.
We appreciate you.
All right, guys, let me pull you off, and then I'll let you guys know who I'm going to pull on here first. Let me start with let me give Nicky from C-Bus. I'll let him come on first here. Let me just get him on the screen. Let me get him solo here. All right, man, it's all you, Nick.
Thanks, Rock. Appreciate it. I want to start out by saying what a blast it's been. I know we touched on this a little bit during the holiday season, but you know, if you can't tell, I absolutely love talking college football and appreciate the invite and look forward to doing it hopefully next college football season as well. So my parting shot is actually going to be a Dan Mullen. You know, I haven't pulled any punches with any of these now at the fourth time. You know, I just can't stand crybaby coaches, and I can't stand coaches that don't own their mistakes or don't own their football team's play. And if you caught his post-game comments after the bowl game this year, he made the backhanded comment that this wasn't the 2020 football team. This was the practice squad team. You know, he skates ownership all the time. They lost the SEC championship game, and that wasn't their fault. They lost the LSU game with the shoe toss. He took no ownership for the shoe toss and discipline on his football team. It then in turn became, you know, maybe they still deserve to be in the playoffs. So my parting shot is, Dan Mullen, until you win something, until you turn that program fully around, please show some class. It goes all the way and carries all the way down to your program. You're better than that, and that's my parting shot. Rock, take care.
All right, man. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, let's go to Coach Kramer here. Let me get him on screen. Let me put him on here solo. Let's see what we got here. Let me get you on solo, Coach. All right, man, what do you got?
Well, we've talked about this ad nauseum. We've had a great time together, and this is something I hope we get to continue. I'm going to switch gears from college football to high school football, and as a high school head coach, whether it be football, basketball with Nick, or any other sport, I think we all know what an important role high school athletics plays to an individual in a school and a community. And we're just all hoping we get a chance. I know some other teams had a chance this fall, other sports had a chance to play, and I'm hoping all high school athletes get a chance to experience this at some time in New York State. And I miss it, and I miss my guys, and I miss the colleagues I get to coach against. So let us play. That's it.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it. All right, let's go to let's get Nick. Let's get Medicis on. Usually I put Nick on last, but let me give Nick his. All right, what do you got, Nick?
All right. Well, first off, again, thanks, Rock, for having me on. And Jim, I could not have said that any better. You hit everything nail on the head right there. What I'm going to talk about is the playoff committee. And you want to fix your opt-out problem, expand the playoff, make bowls important. When you make only 4 bowls important, the other bowls don't mean anything to these guys. They're worried about their career, what's going on. Look at what happened to De'Aaron King at Miami. Says he's coming back. He tears his ACL in a meaningless bowl game. You want to make these bowl games important. You want everybody to play, expand the playoff, do it the right way. If they can figure it out in Pop Warner, in high school, at Division III, Division II, 1AA, the NFL, expand the playoff. Thanks, Rock.
All right, man. We'll see you.
See ya.
All right, let me get Jake on here. Let's see when we got him on here. All right, Jake. Last but not least, what do you got?
I think this is the first time out of 4 shows I've been last. I've usually been the first one.
Yeah.
You know, love the show. I'm glad I'm a part of it. You know, hopefully it's enjoyable to watch. Had a lot of fun doing it, and hopefully we can keep doing it for years to come. You know, like Coach Kramer says, is, you know, let us play, not just football, but for all sports. You know, high school sports, everyone remembers them playing high school sports, and it's not just the games on the field. It's the making the friendships and everything in the locker rooms, being there for each other, and having that bond that athletes have out there. And, you know, athletes are missing that now. My thing I'm going to talk about is the targeting call. You know, yeah, in that Clemson game, it played a huge role, and it, by the rule, should have got ejected. But, you know, with technology these days, with all the replays and everything, and if especially it's not going towards someone's head or like a dangerous play, you know, we got to have different levels of that targeting. Maybe it's still the 15 yards and he gets the 1 warning. If he has another hit like that, it's another one. But, you know, players are so fast now, and, you know, it's a split second for someone to come up to make a tackle. You know, I know people teach keep your head out of it and you're wrapping and rolling, but at certain times, sometimes the head does come involved. But especially if it's not towards someone else's head and you're launching at them, I think there needs to be a change in that, and that they can look at to different things with that. But once again, Rock, I appreciate it, and this was a lot of fun.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. So were those guys not great or what? Those guys were awesome. And I'm so surprised because I have the agenda up to what I have, and I have my notes on the screen. They can't see it. But we all had different coaches. We all had different stories. Everybody had a lot of different takes. I do want to give my pardon shot. My pardon shot's a little bit more personal because every New Year's Day, the game for me growing up, I remember watching it at my grandfather's house, was always the Rose Bowl. That was the game in college football. And I was fortunate enough when I graduated from college in 2002, I had always told my mom and dad I wanted to go to the Rose Bowl. And my mom had asked me, you know, what I would want for a graduation present. And I'm not really picky. I don't ever ask for big things. And I'll never forget Christmas morning. We came over to my mom and dad's house to open up presents. And on the Christmas tree, my mom had all roses on the tree, and she had an envelope. And I opened up the envelope, and my mom and dad had paid for my dad and I to fly to Pasadena. And this was right after 9/11. And when my dad and I flew to Pasadena, they had Army guys with guns at the airports on planes. And it was probably the best week. And what my mom didn't know, that it was not only the Rose Bowl game, it was the national championship game. It was Nebraska and Miami. Now, it wasn't a good game. Miami, if many remember back in 2000, I think it was 2002, because that's the year I graduated college. Frank Solich was the head coach at Nebraska. Larry Coker was the head coach at Miami. Ken Dorsey was the quarterback of Miami. They had the great Andre Johnson. But it was a week that, you know, I'll never forget. It was my dad and I for the week. It was a good time. We met up with some good friends that we didn't even know ended up being good friends. We hung out with Nebraska fans. We hung out with Miami fans, and it was so cold. It was a night game, and it rained for the parade. Pasadena was supposed to be really nice, and the weather wasn't the greatest, but it was a lot of fun. And one of my all-time favorite broadcasters was calling a game. And if you're a college football fan, Rose Bowl guy, you know the name Keith Jackson. Keith Jackson was up in the booth. Tim Bryant was another one that was up in the booth. And how about the great Lynn Swan was on the field as a sideline reporter for the national championship game. There was 93,000 people there. We had great seats. So for me, it was easy. It was more personal. The Rose Bowl always has something special for me because I got to go down there with my dad. So tonight, listen, again, thanks to all the coaches. Thanks to Jake. Thanks to Coach Kramer. Thanks to Coach Medicis. Thanks from Nick from CBUS. This was the final season of the College Football Rewind. Coach Medicis and I are going to launch a basketball podcast, which will be Inside the Paint. We'll air that very soon here within the next couple of weeks. So I'll make sure to stay tuned for that. Next week, right here on the Rock Pile, Bill DiPaolo is going to join me to talk about his entertainment service business. So he'll join me right here next Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. So on behalf of myself, the entire coaches, all the crew tonight here on the Rock Pile, as I always say, the Rock Pile is where dreams become reality. Enjoy the week, everybody. Be safe.